Hi, everybody. I am just excited to have Echo and Dr. Lin present to us on how to offer an extraordinary virtual visit. We have been utilizing virtual visits heavily in the rheumatology clinic. They've done amazing work converting their visits when this COVID situation hit. And then the rehab team has been starting just a week or so ago. So the timing's good in my viewpoint for both teams, for the rheumatology team to be learning some pearls and maybe adapt from some of what they've already been doing. And then for the rehab team who's just getting started to maybe learn how to get off on the right foot. So with that, we are recording the session. So we'll be posting this up on either our team site or our SharePoint, or maybe both, or maybe they tie together. I still don't understand the technology. And then I will be watching the chat for the meeting. So if you have a question, please just write it in the chat and I'll be watching that. So take it away, Echo. I think you were going to get started. Great. And then Dr. Lin will help us.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary, so much, not only for that lovely introduction and foundation for what we're doing today, but for inviting Dr. Lin and I here to speak to your team. Hi, everybody. I know you guys can see me. It's hard not to see you back, but I know that you're all there, and it feels really good to connect with you guys today, so I hope you're doing well. We're going to spend about 15 minutes or so just kind of reviewing some basics of virtual visits. I know that the visits are new to us, but the behaviors and the competencies and the skills are the same. There's nothing new really that I'm bringing forward. And then Dr. CT Lin has been doing lots and lots of virtual visits, and he has some great tips to share with you just from his perspective. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first step of a virtual visit is just like an in-person visit, it's that self-awareness. And I put facial expressions on here first because never before has a look on our face been so important when we're interacting with someone else. Usually there's a lot going on in an in-person visit, right? There's our body language, there's the environment, there's everything that patients have gone through to get into the room when they're sitting in front of you. It is much, much different now. So to kind of explore facial expressions, we're going to do a quick activity. If you do not have your video on and can see yourself, go ahead and turn your video on. If you're not comfortable with that, pick up your phone and turn the camera to face you, or go stand in front of a mirror, whatever works best. But for the next 90 seconds or so, you guys need to be able to see your faces. So I'll give us about 20 seconds to get to a place where you can see yourself. All right, hopefully everybody's settled somewhere where you can see yourself. The first thing I want you to do is look at yourself and make an angry face. How do you look when you're angry? And now I want you to see how you look when you're worried. How do you look when you're worried? Now, was there a big change in your facial expressions from anger to worry? Maybe a little bit. Most of you probably are like me and you're thinking there's not a big change. I think that's really powerful. Anger and worry or concern are two emotions that really display similarly on our faces. So anger and worry, two completely different emotions that display themselves similarly. Okay, let's try the next one. I want you to look at yourself when you're relaxed. It may have been a while since you really felt relaxed, but I go way back. How do you look when you're relaxed? And now, how do you look when you're thoughtful? When you're really thinking about something. So relaxed versus thoughtful. Another two emotions that show similarly on our faces and we want to be aware of. When I go from relaxed to thoughtful, really the only change is my eyes kind of pop up. Like I look towards the ceiling because I'm thinking about something. And I've gotten feedback that when I do that, the person on the other end of the screen thinks that I'm distracted. And I've been looking at something else because I've looked away when really I'm just thinking about what I heard. So relaxed and thoughtful, two very similar emotions that display on the face. Let's go ahead and do one more. How do you look when you're happy? Let's do a renewing emotion. Happy. And how do you look when you've received a good surprise? Good sound effect. Yeah, happy and good surprise are another two emotions that display very similarly on our face. So thank you guys for participating. I just want to encourage you to really be in touch with yourselves and have that self-awareness around facial expressions, especially with virtual visits. Do they matter all the time? Yes, but especially when we're online with someone else and really all they can see are our faces. The next piece of self-awareness is body language. Not as important when you're or in a room with the person, but you guys can see me. This is me sitting up in my workspace, and this is me kind of lounging over. Or this is me being maybe really super too relaxed. So really pay attention that you're sitting up, that you're facing the computer. Dr. Lin has some really great tips about this. He'll review with us a little later. The third piece of self-awareness is that emotions, just like in an in-person visit before you go into the room, you want to take a pause. You want to make sure you're not taking any frustration from the virtual visit before into the visit with the patient that you're meeting with now. All of this stuff, you guys, we have loads and loads of information on kind of that facial expression, body language, emotions check. Our first 2 years of our Experienced Champions, this was our focus and our topic. So please reach out if you need further information.
Echo.
Oh, the next, yeah.
The audio isn't very good quality anymore. I don't know if something just changed.
Thanks, Hillary. Is that better?
Yes.
I'm getting not better, maybe better.
A little bit.
My apologies. How's that?
That sounds better.
Okay. Okay. So the next piece, of course, of virtual visits is that speed and the tone of our words. Second to facial expressions, how quickly we're talking, the tone, the rhythm, the speed, all of that really matters. We won't do the exercise right now, but I really encourage you guys to record your voices. Just reading something or stating something that you're familiar with, and then listen to it just to see how your tone is working. And then, of course, my apologies, we have our usual communication programs that we know. We've got Made It, where we manage up, we acknowledge, we introduce, we explain duration, we explain and we thank, and empathetic communication. So these two things are just a reminder, guys. These are tools that we have in our toolkit around communication. It was neat to come into virtual visit and realize that we didn't have to create anything new, that the things that we are already using can be adapted to virtual visits. So I'll pause right there for any questions.
I'm not seeing any on the chat.
Okay, let's keep moving ahead. I bring you this slide because this is our patient prep slide, and this is the information that our patients get when they are prepping for a virtual visit. And we won't go through this, of course, step by step, but I bring it to your attention so that you know if a patient is already feeling nervous or worried or anxious about their visit, and then they have to prepare all of these things, the first time they come to you as a new virtual visit, they're going to probably be pretty anxious. And that's just something for us to keep in mind. It's a bit more than following GPS directions and getting to the clinic. There's a lot of steps. So kind of a self-care tool. It was for me when I saw this and I said, oh, wow, they have a lot to do. So if they join the visit and they are feeling kind of excited or anxious or worried, they've already gone through a lot, and for me to remember that. So just a few more steps around virtual visit, being prepared. Now, I think that's kind of common sense, but we want to make sure that we are as comfortable with the technology as we want our patients to be. So make sure that you've got the tech stuff set up. If you need the help desk, you know, they're at 84000. We want to make sure, as always, we're familiar with patient records and history, especially for those first-time visits. And of course, the degree of how familiar we are with the other person will vary depending on rheumatology, if it's your team, physical therapy and rehab, if it's your team. But we do know across the board, the more we're able to understand about our patient, the more comfortable the encounter is likely to be. And that certainly applies with virtual visits. The next thing we have here is visual tools. And I'm sure you're wondering why I have all these memes on here today. I'm not trying to be unprofessional, but I'm trying to help you remember that visual tools are super important. I mean, first of all, it's the visual visit that we're having, but screen sharing can be helpful, sharing charts, anything that you can maybe draw, even something as simple as the provider is prescribing 2 pills twice a day. So they hold up a 2, right? People learn much differently when you're saying numbers, holding up a 2, anything that you can share helps our patients better understand what's happening and helps them become more engaged in their healthcare. Third quick tip, mindful presence, right? We want patients to feel like they are in the room with us. We give them undivided attention. We only want to look away when we're entering notes, which definitely explain to them, you know what, I glance away because I'm entering notes, or I'm looking this way once in a while because I have a poster of a body up here and I want to make sure what I'm telling you is correct. Anytime you're looking away or may seem distracted or not present, make sure to connect with the person and let them know what's happening. We don't want them to feel like we are multitasking or trying to juggle other things while we're on a call with them. And last but not least, just as if we were in an in-person visit and they were in the office, we want patients to feel that their visits come to a logical end with a good understanding of next steps. Just as we tell an in-office patient to enjoy the rest of the day, hopefully you feel better by morning, or the front desk will schedule you for a follow-up, virtual patients are looking for these telltale signs that their visit is over. They don't just want the screen to go dark. So whatever your kind of ending conversation or scripting or send off is, have something that you're comfortable doing when it's time to say goodbye. And I'll pause there for questions. Guys, I know I went over a lot of information. Again, none of it is new to us at UCHealth in our world. It's good information and tools we already have that we just slightly adapt. So I'll take questions, and Hillary, I'll hand it to you to get us started with Dr. Lin.
I muted myself because that flooring project was loud a minute ago.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat, but certainly if anyone has any, they can send them to me and I can forward them to Echo if needed. I do have one question about the presentation. So Echo, are you driving the slide?
I am.
Yeah, and I wonder, because I keep seeing a message that says, please move this window away from the shared application.
Oh.
I don't know. Is everyone seeing that?
Yes, I'm seeing that also.
I don't know if that, or maybe just in the slide show mode, maybe. I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Dr. Lin, I'm going to stop sharing. If you want to, the next slide is your tips, and maybe that'll go away.
Yeah, let me do that. Okay. Let me take over the screen share and see what happens. What does that look like to people?
That looks good. I don't see it on my end.
Yeah, that message has gone away, so that's good.
Sorry
It's
about
a little,
that.
it's a little bit small, but I think I already sent this out. So yes, now Dr. CT Lin is going to share some of his words of wisdom with all of his experience. This tip sheet that he's showing, I already did attach it to the meeting invitation, I believe, but I can certainly resend if needed. So if you can't read the details, you can get this by email soon. So thank you, Dr. Lin. You can get started.
Great. I think I'm off mute. Can everyone hear me? Raise your hand if you can. Oh, look, a couple of raised hands. How amazing. So that's actually part of one of the tips that I would recommend that I'm going to cover in just a minute. I find it so amazing that we can deconstruct our office in such a way that my medical assistant is a dozen miles away. I'm frankly in my basement office because, you know, my wife and my two kids have priority for the nice rooms in the house where they're doing Zoom with their classes and their work. But, you know, Dad gets the basement office. So here I am. I have a sun lamp in the corner. I have my other bedside lamp, and I'm trying to get as much light in here as possible so I'm not sitting in the dark. But when I connect with my patient who's at yet a third location, I just like naturally like, yay, there you are. It's amazing. I mean, every connection in this time of pandemic, I feel like, is an amazement. So, you know, let your emotion show, because all of us are emoting through these 2-inch windows, these 4-inch windows, and it's very hard to get nonverbal body language across. You know, so a little bit about me. I'm the Chief Medical Information Officer. So traditionally, everything that people hate about Epic comes my way. You're welcome, I'll say. So that's part of it. But I'm also a general internist, and I've been practicing here for 25 years and seeing primary care internal medicine patients, and until recently, hospital patients. I'm actually on one of the surge teams for ambulatory doctors going into the uncomfortable role of potentially being part of a surge team to take care of hospital patients should that surge arrive. And then finally, I do teach communications workshops on interpersonal reaction. And from that particular environment, we know that emotional connection between clinician and patient is 50% body language, which in person, you get the full dynamic range of body language. You get the, no, doc, quitting smoking won't be a problem for me. And you're like, oh, yes, it will be. Look at that. Or you know, no, I have nothing to hide. You know, there's nothing I need to hide. You know, oh, you're talking behind your hand. There's a problem with that. And so all of these things are now these tiny 1 or 2 inch windows that you're trying to get body language through, and it's like sipping through a straw. The other part is that emotional connection comes from tone of voice. And at least we have that persistent as long as our electronic communication doesn't stutter and, you know, drop in and out as it commonly does. And then worse even than that would be if you're just typing, right? And everyone has the experience of using My Health Connection. Again, you're welcome. Epic providing lots of ways for patients to send you lots of words, and you're trying to figure out, are they yelling at me? Are they happy with me? What's going on inside these words? And we do know from emotional connection literature that 10% of the connection between individuals comes through in the words. It's 40% tone of voice. It's 50% body language. And so in so many ways, when we're using video, audio, or text, you have to be extra careful about the emotion you convey and the emotion you're assuming based on what you're receiving. So just keeping that in mind. All right, hopping to the tip sheet. One thing that we do prior to the visit in ambulatory is that it's helpful to scrub your visit together, schedule together, and anticipate what's going on. So if you're working with an assistant, a technologist, whomever, it's helpful to have a huddle at the beginning of the week, at the beginning of the day, and say, here's what I see in the patients who are coming in. Let's make sure we do this, or let's target that. That can be helpful even with in-person visits, but it's doubly helpful for virtual visits. There's an entire demonstrate professionalism tip sheet that if Hillary, you don't have access to this, we can share it. It's on the provider's dashboard within Epic, where there's Jen Simpson actually went through a lengthy list of, you know, what does your background look like? You know, what is your light that's on your face? Is it coming from the side so half your face is in darkness? What are the things that you can do to make sure your presentation as professional as possible. And maybe it's time to change out of that sweatshirt, that sort of thing. So, side note, I'm hearing that Target is selling lots of professional tops, but they're not selling any bottoms, which is right. Then eye contact, right? So I actually have a sticky note, and I'm not necessarily good at this because I'm looking over at the gallery view on the side next to my document, but I have, as my sister taught me, a sticky note right next to the camera on my computer that says, look here, to remind me, oh, you know what, that's where the eye contact occurs. And it's not necessarily where the shows up. So be conscious of that. Try to avoid running late. I'm also on Twitter and reading a lot of other folks who are writing about virtual visits, and a lot of folks are commenting to the idea that clinic visits tend to be running a lot more on time now because no one shows up a half hour late. So they either connect to the visit or not, but they're typically a lot more on time. And so consequently, I'm trying to do a lot better about being on time. Or if I am running behind time, if I can use Epic Secure Chat. If many of you are not using Secure Chat, that can be incredibly powerful because it's built right into Epic. You can get to it from Epic Hyperspace on your computer. And if you have Haiku, which all of you should have permissions to do so, download the Haiku app on your smartphone. You can use that to secure chat with your assistant, and it can be linked to the patient's chart or can be independent of it. But regardless, it's HIPAA protected because it's encrypted within the Epic system. So use that to communicate with each other. I'll actually say to my MA, hey, let my patient know I'm 5 minutes behind, so they don't drop off the room going, well, I guess they forgot about me. Greeting the patient, again, it costs very little money to raise your arms and just be surprised and say hi. Most patients love it. That because of mirror neurons, we know from neurology, it's actually hard for patients not to raise their own hands. And I'll have to say it frequently, patients will go, hey, how are you? And it's kind of a nice way to get the visit going. Be careful that the patient's in a safe private spot. We're hearing one of my physician colleagues on Twitter actually surveyed their patients and physicians about what do you like and hate about video visits. And one of the patients said, well, the only place my computer sits is in the living room, and I hate having my family around listening to my visit. So sometimes you might ask, are you in a safe private spot when I talk to you? So that you can gauge how much you can reveal to the patient in that time. I had a terrible, in hindsight, I wasn't smart enough to stop it, but I had a patient and their mother who was having the visit driving while they're on the video visit. And so she's off screen yelling at her mom, Mom, tell her about this while she's driving. And I'm thinking, first thing I should have said was, could you please pull over? This visit won't go very well like this. So, just be aware, you're gonna get some crazy, interesting things from the other side. Talk human to human. Sometimes and frequently patients will start off with, how are you, doctor? Which is kind of cool that they're worried about us. And it's maybe worth starting with whether they're scared, whether they're worried, and what's going on in regards to the pandemic, which is much bigger than all of us, before you get straight down to business. Instead of going, oh, good, nice to see you. Let's start with topic 1. You go, well, how are you? That's actually, in hindsight, a good way to establish a great connection with in-person visits. And it's even more important with video visits. Reflective listening. Reflective listening is a topic that we teach in our communications workshop. Some of us are great naturally, but it is a trainable skill. And I frequently, even being an instructor in this course, hear myself not doing reflective listening, and then going back and stopping and going, oh, you know what, I could probably do that more. So reflective listening is sort of listening to the patient and then saying back what you hear. And you don't have to say it in extended time. One of my medical students who used to work with me said, well, gee, Dr. Lin, you're recommending that I double the length of my visit with the patient because you want me to repeat every sentence back to them? And the answer is no. You can summarize in as little as 1 or 2 words. If they go on about how their elbow's been hurting, and you say, oh, your elbow's been hurting. That's 2 weeks. Thank you. All right. Well, what else? And so that's enough of reflective listening. One of my colleagues takes that a bit further. And if you're really trying to establish a good relationship with a patient, not only can you reflective listen data, for example, on this tip sheet, it's been 5 days of worse symptoms. Is that right? You can also reflect ideas, feelings, and values. And sometimes with a difficult conversation where patients are really not on the same page with you, you can reestablish that relationship by doing things like ideas. So you think it might be gout, right? Well, and that's pretty straightforward when you agree that it might be gout. But I've had patients go, I had this abdominal pain and it's going down to my lower side and I'm having a fever and I'm pretty sure it's gout. And you're like, well, to yourself, you say, well, that's not right at all. But you can say, oh, so you're having some abdominal pain, goes down to the right side, and you're concerned it might be gout? Yes, doctor, you're the first doctor who's heard me, right? And then, of course, then you can say, well, I kind of don't agree that this is gout, but I hear where you're coming from. And then you can reestablish that relationship. Feelings and values similarly. So you're worried about work. Is that your main concern? Or values. So what's important to you is really spending time with your family. Is that right? And so the reflective listening can be so much more powerful than just reflecting data. Another workshop that we teach includes these items on pearls. This is more about recovering or service recovery for a relationship that may not be as strong as it could be, or something's gone wrong in the patient's previous healthcare, and they come to you and they're just unhappy, or they have a beef with you. And PEARLS is a great acronym to think about. PEARLS includes partnership, right? Statements like, we'll get through this together. I love using the partnership statement near the end of our visit. Hey, I understand you're not feeling well, and thank you for visiting with me. You know what? We'll get through this together. We're here for you. My team is here for you. We're not going anywhere, right? That's a very reassuring statement to make. Empathy, mainly in regards to reflective listening as above. Apology, right? It's okay to say, I'm really sorry that happened. Or if you had a part in it, I'm sorry for my part in it. I didn't mean for that to happen. Respect, you've worked really hard on this. I don't think there's a single patient in the world who doesn't respond to a statement like that.
No, it's fun.
Getting to hear you've spent a long time waiting for this visit with us to look at your elbow. You've worked really hard on this. It looks like you've tried all these things. Legitimization. Anyone in your situation would feel that way, right? I'm sorry that we can't do in-person PT with you right now, and I see that you're really frustrated. Anyone in your situation would feel like that. And then support. My team and I are here for you. We aren't going anywhere. Physical exam creativity. There's lots of ways that if you go on social media, you hear from clinicians saying they're trying lots of different things. One of my cardiology colleagues says if you teach the patient to put your fingers on the side of your neck, and instead of having them count their own pulse, you just say beep every time you feel a pulse. And can you imagine a patient going beep, 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 beep? Chances are you've diagnosed atrial fibrillation right there. How cool is that? And other things that you can do is ask if the patient has equipment. Do you have a blood pressure cuff? Do you have a pulse ox? Do you have a flashlight to shine in your throat? You have a thermometer, that sort of thing. In fact, one of the other things I was reading about was there's a doctor in Ireland who actually published a study on being able to take pulse ox using patients taking a big breath and counting. Of course, it's not validated for a mile high here in Denver, but the idea was to say, ask the patient to count to 30, take a big breath and count as far to 30 as they can. And if they can get past 5 seconds of counting and can count past 7, then they're likely to have a pulse ox greater than 90%. So for example, you would say, ask the patient to count. Ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, if you only got to 9, right, what does that mean about your pulse ox? And so I'm waiting for one of my colleagues here to replicate this in Denver to figure out if, without having a fancy, $50 device for your finger, can you figure out how breathless the patient truly is? So what other things can we be creative about that through video we can do an exam with? Ask for help from family. So we've had actually some colleagues say, well, you go and have the patient come by and say, well, have the patient turn over and then push him right here. See what that goes. Ow, that hurts. Okay, right upper quadrant tenderness. That's interesting, right? So or have a patient family member come by and say, well, look, the side of the neck, and can you describe that? Or push here, or feel here, see what that says. Or you might get a history elements from the family. The patient says, well, no, I don't have pain, and the spouse will go, oh yeah, he complains about it, at every mealtime, right after he takes his first bite. Oh, that's interesting data. They may ask you about you as a human, and that's quite gratifying. In this time of pandemic, a large fraction of patients will start off with, how are you doing? And are you staying safe? And you're washing your hands, doctor? And, I'm worried about you. And so that can be quite a cool way to connect human to human. Brief life advice. So many of our patients have anxiety, and I would presume, actually, the majority of the patients we connect with are anxious. And they have to go a long way to convince me that they're not anxious. In fact, I don't believe most people when they say, no, I don't have any anxiety right now. And so I actually end up going through the things that I've written on our whiteboard for our family. One is we try to limit our news and social media to 30 minutes per day. After 30 minutes, you're just rehashing the same stuff. And our brain is out there seeking new knowledge about when is this thing going to be over. And it's tempting to be on there for hours and hearing every bad thing that's going worldwide. And our brains are not wired to accept worldwide bad news. So try to limit to 30 minutes. Or maybe take days off when you don't watch the news. Exercise daily. I can't tell you how many jogs and walks I've been on more than usual, and that's been very helpful to me. And then another part is, listen to or make music every day. I have a ukulele that I'm learning claw hammer technique right now. I'm terrible at it, but it brings me joy. So I'm hopeful you have something like that as well. And then at dinner time, we have something we do called 3 good things. And we try to, as a family, come up with 3 things that we're grateful for. Because in this time of pandemic, where the thing that we tend to talk about is, oh, did you hear this bad thing? I heard this other thing. Or this bad thing happened to me too. And we tend to perseverate on the worst things. Try to come up with 3 good things that you can talk about at dinner, just to refocus ourselves and give this advice to patients as well. So that's a habit for our dinner time. After visit summary and open notes, I used to be very comfortable with giving patients a printout with everything that we talked about at the end of the visit. And I don't do that as much anymore because you can't reach through the screen and go, hey, here, take this piece of paper. But you can point them back to My Health Connection if they're comfortable and say, the after visit summary that we used to have is still there. Please give me an hour or 2 to finish my notes today. And then at the end of the day, please look and make sure you agree with the advice that I gave you, because the words that I talked about, the things that I want you to go by, the things that I want you to do will all be there for your reminder. And then reassurance and hope, right? Stay in touch with your loved ones. We're going to get through this. I feel like as a medical professional, they look to us for advice and reassurance. And then ending the visit, considering a hand wave. Some of my colleagues are doing this. I find this a bit odd to do, but I like waving. I like doing the thumbs up, keep going, you're doing a nice job. Some sort of reassurance to the patient can be helpful. And then I hand off finally with secure chat with my medical assistant. So I'll take patients and I'll say, well, gee, what's our next step? Hey, how about we talk again in a couple of days? How about we talk again next week? One thing I like doing is actually setting up a online in-basket message to myself. If you've not known that you can do that, you can actually set a future delivery message to yourself that will show up in 2 days and 5 days.
So where'd you go for your?
And it shows back up in your in-basket as a reminder to talk to the patient. So those are the ideas that I have, and I'm open for questions.
I don't see any questions yet on the chat, but if anyone has a question, please submit one. And if you're not asking a question, please put yourself on mute. We did a fairly good job throughout the presentation. I hope that my background noise with the flooring project didn't disturb anyone. I tried to put myself on mute when I was hearing the drilling. But yeah, does anyone have any questions?
I have a question, but I chatted to CT instead of you by mistake. I apologize. But if I can just ask it, if that's okay.
Go for it. Yes, please.
So CT, when you're positioning the patient's screen, because we walk a line in between being able to document and being able to see the patient's full scope of facial and body expressions. So when you're positioning for your interaction with the patient, typically I try to put the patient's image as close as I can to the camera on my screen. But my question is, do you minimize that picture so you have more room to document? Or do you keep it a larger picture, but then that actually increases the amount of time you're looking away at either your other screen or wherever you're doing your documentation?
Dwayne, that's a something that I struggle with, the idea of where do you look and how large should the patient's image be and how tiny should your text box that you're typing into be. It's a juggle. I don't have a standard setup. Sometimes I end up using my phone. And so unfortunately that means, to the screen, I'm looking like this, typing. And so to Echo's point, it is helpful to say, I'm not building my shopping list. I'm actually charting on things and looking something up. If you're doing it on your phone, you can actually turn it around and show the screen and say, look, this is the chart of the screen I'm looking at, and your weight's been going up, and I'm not happy with that. What do you think? So you could do that as well. But no, I don't have a standard thing. When I'm trying to make better eye contact with the patient, I'll move things around to try to make the patient's face bigger. I've also tried to juggle between, frankly, most of the time it's easier to see the patient's face here on a separate screen and then work on Epic here. But you're right, that means at most the patient's going to be about 3 inches tall. So if you're trying to look at a skin lesion or you're trying to look at elbow movement or swelling, you're going to have a hard time there. But the other way to do it would be to set it up on Chrome, paste the link from my chart, my Health Connection, into there and have a side by side, and then you're having to move stuff around to figure out what's ideal. I don't know that there's no best practice as far as I'm concerned.
It's funny. I tend to shift in between having, because at home I have an Apple with a big screen, and so I tend to use the single screen. But then I used a Haiku, and Hillary gave us these super cool little things. It's unfortunate here I have to get rid of my background to show it. Oh, sorry. Best practices sometimes is not to have a background. But we have these little things from UCHealth that we hang on the computer. And so I hang that with my view and the patient view right next to the camera.
Oh,
but
nice.
Then if I have 2 screens, then I typically go patient documentation. But I just wanted to know if you had a best practice, because I can't figure out which one I like more. I just flip back and forth.
Yeah, I think we're all struggling here. I don't. It would be great to have a picture-in-picture where your person is right next to the camera, so that you're automatically looking. Because already right now I'm looking at the corner of my screen where you are, and clearly not looking at the camera. Yeah. So it's very tempting to do that. I don't have a great idea yet. So when you guys come up with a best practice, I'm all ready.
The only other best practice I have is which is very few, is I noticed that some of Hillary's teams have it as well, but you have to have a good collection of hats handy. Just in case, I saw one of your providers had a really nice, it looked like a buffalo hat on.
Yeah, that's a guy over at Stapleton. Yep.
That was awesome, and I was inspired by guys. So make sure you have a good collection of hats nearby.
Yeah.
I love it.
And everyone, I do have those little phone holders. I dropped some off at Colorado Center yesterday. Stapleton, there will be some coming your way, and Boulder. I think Stapleton already has also purchased from Amazon kind of the phone holder that you can put in your car, that has like a movable arm, and that they have found helpful. But I think that suggestion of Haiku on your phone so that your laptop is available for Epic documentation seems to be pretty relevant for the therapist.
Hillary, have you had any experience doing physical therapy related visits over video, and what limitations and successes have you found?
Yeah, personally, I have not yet, but many of the therapists on the meeting today have been doing it in this last week. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and share, one of our therapists, Ben Wicke, kind of created a tip sheet of like a good setup of, patient with a yoga mat, and then he shared that with his team so that some of that preparation that you referred to, we can be sharing with our patients ahead of time so that they know a good setup, and even a setup for the therapist as well, with the different tools around you. Guy?
Yeah, I hopefully everybody can hear me. I muted myself. I had a question, Dr. Lin, as our information officer. We've been using in the clinic, at least for our virtual visits, we've been using the combination of using the interface be on our phone so we can talk to the patient face to face, and then using our computers as like for documentation, using our exercise prescription program, things like that. One of the things that's really different is that our computers are sitting on the network, and I'm talking from Stapleton. I'm over at a satellite. And so the internet speeds are very fast, but our phones sit on the guest network. And so the internet speeds are they're very slow. Given that we have increased our virtual visits by, I'm not quite sure what the number is, probably a million-fold.
500, I think, 500% or something like that.
Is there a way to think about us being able to get our personal devices that we use for virtual visits on UCHealth's network?
That's really interesting. I will, if you, let's see, you're at Stapleton. Do you mind sending me a brief email saying that that your phone on the guest network performance is perceived slow, and any details about your device? And I'll shoot this up the ladder because the intent is that the guest network performs as well as the encrypted network.
Okay.
That's fully intended. And because all of physicians on CU medicine are on the guest network, myself included. So if we need to investigate the pipeline to Stapleton and reconfigure some settings, let's definitely do it. So any examples like that, I'd like to hear about.
Will do. Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions that have come through the chat. So the little phone holder people have said is great, but is there a problem with echo? And I don't know if Dr. Pearson can speak to that, you know, or with when you have a, you know, a phone and a computer going at the same time, is there any problem with the audio doing any echoing?
I can speak to no, because I'm only in one link at that time. And so on the screen itself, I have Epic open, my documentation, any other ancillary data. So, because sometimes I'll actually be working with other charts open from groups like QHN or Care Everywhere. And then I'm using, so it's really, I'm only having one connection link open at a time, so there's no echo.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, so you're only in the room with the patient on your phone, and then you're in Epic documenting on your laptop. Got it.
Correct. And so there's different workflows of joining through Haiku versus joining through Chrome as your browser. And so if I'm using my phone, I'm only joining through Haiku and not using Chrome at that time.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to let CT know that I've learned everything I can from him and what a good team his group has done to make this happen. It's been absolutely incredible. And so this is, he's absolutely catapulted us into the future. So thanks, CT. And thanks for letting me show off what you've taught me.
Well, on behalf of the organization, you know, we were doing about 20 video visits per day, and we're averaging 4,000 right now. It's a 20x improvement. It's not a 2x or 4x, it's 20x. It's really pretty incredible. A lot of the health organizations around the country are scrambling. They're using Zoom, they're using FaceTime, they're using whatever they can find. And yet, because our infrastructure was in place last year, we just couldn't get anyone's attention to want to use it until suddenly, hey, wasn't there this guy talking about video visits last year? Shouldn't we go back and talk to him? And then boom, we just sort of exploded. So we've been very fortunate.
Great. Just a few more questions. Someone's commenting, you know, if you have the patient on your phone, you know, it's hard for therapy, especially to see the whole patient. So that is a limitation.
So let's talk about that, because different from what Dwayne was just describing, you can also from your laptop, or better yet, if you somehow have a large display at home, that if you bring up Epic and they've scheduled as a video visit, the first thing you open, when you open the patient's chart, the first thing you see is a hyperlink to a website, which is within the company we use is Video, which is confusing, VIDYO. That's the external vendor we use. And you take that hyperlink, just double click it, select it, copy it, open up a Chrome browser, because it has to be Firefox or Chrome. on your main computer, not on your phone. And this is another way you can connect with the patient, because pasting that address into a Chrome browser will give you a browser-sized version of the patient's video. So if you're trying to get a larger picture that's, a piece of paper size rather than, index card size, that's another opportunity. And then you have that challenge that Dwayne was talking about. Well, what do you put center? Do you put Epic in a tiny corner and then you have the patient front and center on your display? But that's an opportunity to see a lot more of the patient.
Mm-hmm. Currently for rehab, the virtual visits are happening within the clinic. So at Stapleton, for example, where Guy works with his great hat, they have a dedicated room that they've set up. So that phone mount I was describing with the flexible arm is up high, and they can demonstrate exercises with a treatment table, the plinth in view.
Right.
So that's a nice setup.
Hey Hillary, is it okay to jump on for a second?
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
So one thing that I found and patients really like also is doing the share screen and then having MedBridge videos going for the exercises. And then the video quality, if you decrease it to 360p, that seems to be the best combination of quality, and it doesn't seem to freeze as much. But just depending on the lighting in the room and the space that you have, that seems to be a little bit more clear, at least as a starting point, and going from there.
Got it. And Ben, I know that, you had shared some of the patient setup with everyone, some of that tip that you just described. Are we capturing all of those?
Yeah, I think we have
ideas?
I think there's a virtual visit meeting next week with Hethel. That'll be on there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and Hillary, I did send that out to everybody in my update last week.
Great.
If you have lessons learned from that meeting, I would love to learn about them to distribute to others. So please do that to me. That'd be great.
Yeah, we'd love to share, be able to share with you, since you've shared so much with us.
So technically speaking, there's a couple things that I want to mention briefly. I know we're coming to the end of the time. One is that before we learned about this bug, we were finding that about 20% of our video visits using My Health Connection were ending up with, we could see each other, but we couldn't hear each other.
Mm.
And so one of the hacks I came up with was this, right? Try quitting and rejoining, because sometimes rejoining works, right? So because I'm sitting here going, right? And no one gets anything. So you end up having to, 1 second, and you scribble as fast as you can, you show the paper. So, one way to hack this is little scribbled notes. We're finding that if the technologist or the MA hands off to you by staying on the phone with the patient and then having them get into My Health Connection and start the video visit, our thinking is that the bug happens is that the audio channel is stolen by the phone call. And when you start the video visit, there's no phone channel, and the patient and the MA then hangs up. You end up with a video link where the patient's phone channel is missing. But if they leave and come back in, then the whole experience works. And that has worked for us 100% of the time to fix the audio problem. So if you get a video connection going and you're just waving at each other, tell them, please hang up, come right back in, it should work. And that might happen on the physician side as well. So that's just one tip.
And that was a question that just came through the chat. Any tips when using the phone to help our patients hear us better? My patients couldn't hear me.
Right, so that's number one, is leave and come back. That sometimes helps. Number two is sometimes I end up converting my patients' visits to audio. And for PT, I don't know how that will work for you. But even just being able to talk through things for us sometimes is helpful. And so I have several 90-year-olds who have smartphones because their kids have given them smartphones, and they go, I don't know what these app things you are that you keep talking about. And so we actually spend time, my MAs will spend time trying to help them download, and sometimes you get nowhere, in which case you say, you know what, never mind. Informally, and I think we're about to come up with a formal statement that Doximity video is something that you could use. So many of you are using Doximity now, and I know that Epic has integrated Doximity app into Haiku, right? So if you're not aware, I'd like to make sure you know that there's a tip sheet out there that if you're using Haiku and press the patient's phone number in the Haiku app, it automatically, if you don't have Haiku, will dial from your phone and it'll show your phone number to the patient, which is of course some concern on the provider side. But you can also configure it if you download this app from Doximity and register as a provider, that then you can link directly from Haiku to Doximity, and Doximity allows you to say, please display my clinic phone number to the patient. And so when the patient answers the phone, it looks like you're calling from your office number one. And number two is Doximity, just as of about 3 weeks ago, stood up a video service. So from that same hyperlink, you can choose, I want a phone call, I want a video. And even without My Health Connection working, you can still set up a video. So that's, we consider that a fallback position, because we certainly want people, you're welcome, Guy. We certainly want people to be scheduling through My Health Connection preferentially, because the video counts work better for our reports and the e-consent by the patient works, right? If you're falling back to Doximity video, it's on you to say to the patient, you might receive a bill for this, rather than patients having the wrong perception about, no consent. So that's a fallback position. So if I've spent 5-10 minutes with a patient, it's just not working, I'll say, hold on a minute, Doximity video, you're going to receive a text. And on the patient side, all they have to do is receive the text that says, Dr. Lin is inviting you to a Doximity video visit. Click here, and without an app installing, it shows on their smartphone. So that's a backup plan that you can use as an idea.
Yeah, in rheumatology, they are using Doximity. We have an MA who's rooming the patients from home. So she uses that for the, the calling, and some of our admins. Again, for rehab right now, we're doing our virtual visits from the clinic. So we haven't had to use Doximity, but we will be looking into that so that we can offer these visits from home and yet have people, or have the connection look like it's coming from the hospital number.
Right.
I think that we might run into some issues though with, I think you're only limited a certain number of people in a physician group, and we don't even have physicians. So we need to figure out how to layer that permissions in.
Yeah, right. We have some things to work through.
So then we're almost out of time. The last minute, someone just shared a suggestion that if the patient uses a laptop, it is easier to assess. It's a bigger screen. And I think a lot of the My Health Connection video tip sheets or videos or tip sheets do talk about the patients or show pictures of the patients using laptops. But sometimes the connection through a laptop is harder to get. Or it feels like in rheumatology we've had some technical issues through laptops that we haven't found as much through phones. I don't know if you've heard that, Dr. Lin.
I haven't, but I imagine we have patients with laptops that are decades old too.
Oh,
so
true.
You just don't know what the hardware is on the other side.
But yeah, the exit and come back into the meeting, to the room, it often helps.
Great.
All right. Well, I think that I got all the questions. We really appreciate your time. As I mentioned at the start, this will be recorded and I'll post it and make sure people have access to it. I'll share that tip sheet again. And we'll also, Dr. Lin, that other tip sheet on professionalism, I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to share that with everyone as well.
Great, I'll do that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yay, everybody.
Bye.
Hang in there. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.